So my name is Jennifer Gee, and I'm an assistant professor in the Tourism and Business Department here at Mount St. Vincent University. We're very excited to have Keith Henry with us today to do a presentation on Indigenous tourism across Canada. This project is supported and funded by Mount St. Vincent University and the Government of Canada's Sectoral Initiatives Program. The name of the project is the GNU Tourism Project. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Covenant Chain of Peace and Friendship treaties signed between 1725 and 1779. Here today in the district of Sipekne'katik in Kjipuktuk, we are inspired by the people in their work with tourism and hospitality, past, present, and future. The Mi'kmaq have been connected to these lands and waters, protecting and stewarding them and welcoming and sharing their beauty and wonder to visitors since time immemorial. Welcome to Keith Henry, who is a Métis person that was born in Thompson, Manitoba, and raised in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Mr. Henry began his career in 1995 with teaching positions and has become well known for his strategic, administrative, and negotiation skills. Since 1998, Mr. Henry has led numerous provincial, federal, and industry negotiations on a variety of issues. He has been personally responsible for financial administration of several Indigenous nonprofits and has a proven track record of success. Mr. Henry has become an international Indigenous cultural tourism leader, receiving Indigenous recognition as the former CEO for the Aboriginal Tourism Association of British Columbia. In April 2014, the inaugural World Indigenous Tourism Alliance Award recognized the work that Mr. Henry did for the British Columbia Tourism Association. Mr. Henry has been spearheading the growth of authentic Indigenous tourism in Canada as he worked to redevelop the National Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada as the elected chair when his tourism organization incorporated in April of 2015. In October 2015, Mr. Henry took the full-time role as the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada's president and CEO and has been leading the organization ever since. In Canada, Mr. Henry continues to be recognized across the world as one of the leaders in Indigenous tourism and has led many new initiatives, including the multiple national strategies to grow Indigenous tourism, contributions to the development of national standards on market readiness and authenticity, and multiple research projects on the economic progress of Indigenous tourism. Keith was recognized as one of Canada's 150 ambassadors in 2017 to celebrate Canada's 150th anniversary. Mr. Henry was awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws from the University of Guelph in 2020, and Mr. Henry continues to dedicate time in the Indigenous community and is an elected president of the British Columbia Métis Federation since 2011. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Keith. We look forward to your presentation. And we're excited to get to know you better.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, I guess. Sorry, I'm in the West Coast, so it's still only 9:07 my time, and I know East Coast, I guess you're at 1 o'clock or so. Anyways, it's an honor to be here today, and thank you, Jennifer, for the warm reception. I just want to start by acknowledging the territory I'm on. I'm in Vancouver right now on the shared territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. And so I will do my best over the course of the next 45 minutes to give you an overview of the work we do at ITAC and a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of market interest and what's happening in Indigenous tourism in Canada generally. And I hope to leave you with some thoughts about how you can help. I mean, obviously in these presentations, it's all about trying to leave you with some ideas on what the industry from our perspective needs, or from my own personal work, what I think is required. So, okay, so I'm going to present to you in my role as the president and CEO of the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. We continue to try and help people. We know there's market demand. I'm sure most of you are in this space, recognize the complex challenges with building successful tourism businesses, not just Indigenous tourism, but as we know, tourism is very competitive and it's got its challenges. I'm sure most of us are aware that the climate changes and things like that impact our industry and public perception and social license and all these other things that impact us. And so I'm going to try and give us all some thoughts around how we're handling sort of the evolution of just humanity, in the sense of like what, if many of you are watching even this morning, there's there's a international location where they're trying to stop tourism because they have massive cruise industry there. And so there's all these competing challenges that we're trying to deal with in the midst of that. But I think what I love about Indigenous tourism is that it's really more than just about the economics and the footprint as such. It's really about how do we help Canada on this journey towards reconciliation, which is, I really believe, fundamental to the why so many Indigenous people across Canada are very involved in tourism, whether they know it or not. And I'll explain that a bit more. So if you want to, obviously, if you want to follow along, but this is my email. If you want to email me after, I certainly welcome you to email me at keith@indigenous-tourism.ca. And I've been around this organization, building it from scratch. My story, just in terms of a little bit more of the background, I've been in Indigenous tourism now about 18 years, or a little more than that, actually. I started my journey originally with Indigenous Tourism BC. It was called Aboriginal Tourism BC. And at that time, the entire country had a very modest evolution of Indigenous tourism and the marketing and promotion at that time. So I've seen some trends and some things over the years change. Some get better, some still be challenging today. But we still need to move forward. And so I'm going to continue to give you that context of what the work I support. So who is ITAC? If you don't already know who we are, we're industry focused, industry led. We're a national nonprofit. We're a membership base of Indigenous owned and controlled businesses. And we've got an elected board member from every part of the country, one from every province and territory. Our membership is renewed on an annual basis. And this last year, we just announced recently that our 2024 membership was well over 1,300. So we have a very sizable, actual tangible membership across the country. This is a little bit about our board of directors. And, obviously in Nova Scotia, you can see Marlene Judry, who's also involved with INSITEN, Nova Scotia Indigenous Tourism Enterprise Network. And there's many others that some of you might be familiar with. And each one of these individuals has been involved as an entrepreneur or with a community enterprise, or is currently today. So what do we do at ITAC? Well, we support the growth of Indigenous tourism in Canada. It's really simply that is our reason for being. And we focus on creating partnerships between associations, organizations, government departments, and industry leaders from across the country. Oh, I just realized there's an edit issue here I forgot to correct. But we represent over 1,300 out of 1,900 tourism businesses that are all Indigenous owned and controlled. It's very important that when we talk about Indigenous tourism, part of our requirement is around authenticity is ownership. And it's got to be at least 51% owned business. And that could be hotels, cultural centers, guided walking tours, artisan businesses that are involved in the tourism space. So there's all sorts of ways that the tourism businesses have evolved. Now, just a little bit about the background of how we started. We were originally the Aboriginal Tourism Marketing Circle. In terms of ITAC, there was no national body. And in Canada, we've seen we're now the fourth iteration of a national body trying to help be Indigenous-led, Indigenous industry-led tourism organization, kind of dealing with the branding, the marketing, the development, the coordination of strategy in the country. We really reformed because some of us, and I've been involved from the very beginning meeting in 2009, 2010, we set out because we knew there was no national body. And at that time, I was working in British Columbia. And I could just really see there was no real industry voice for us. There was no real way to impact the work of Destination Canada and the marketing in a tangible way. DC was kind of, at that time, the Canadian Tourism Commission was out there doing their thing. And then, they meant well, but it was not, they didn't understand the challenges of building Indigenous tourism and how do we market and how to create content to market in a respectful way. So all of these things were sort of stirring at that time, and a number of us came together under the ATMC. And the main impetus at the time was the 2010 Winter Olympics. And I still believe today that one event was the most significant change for putting Canada on the world stage as an Indigenous destination. Indigenous tourism's really been around for several decades, but it's only really seen the success that we've been measuring in the last basically 15 to 20 years, because there's been such a specific focus on marketing, promoting, development, all the things that we need to do to build a successful industry. So we've now officially incorporated in 2015, and we're going into almost year 10 of our organization, and we're very proud of the fact that we're moving forward. So I won't get into too much more of that, but what we've been continuing to do as a body is we've been continuing to try and help the country, whether you're government, destination marketing organizations, large tourism industry partners. A lot of people didn't understand the economic footprint, because that's the way this industry works. They don't, on the Indigenous community side, it's about sort of cultural revitalization, authenticity. There's other metrics, more important metrics, I would add. On the tourism side, it's all about economic footprint. And so we put what we called our foundational research was in 2014. We released a study. It was the first of its kind done since 2002. So there just wasn't much research done on the size and scope of the industry. And at that time, we had inventoried several businesses. It was about a little under 1,500, or a little over 1,500 at the time. We did a bunch of surveying with about 132 Indigenous tourism operators from all parts of the country. We met with travel trade, and we just did a lot of secondary research, primary and secondary research, pardon me. So that at that time, we really looked at what was the opportunities, and we've been continuing to evolve that messaging as ITAC, and it was ATAC at this time, I guess. But these are some of the examples of like the study and what it determined at the Indigenous tourism sector. And if you read these very same principles are still today, right? We want to inspire elders to pass down culture, history, and traditions. We want to revitalize Indigenous traditions for the benefit of the community and travelers. We want to enhance the livelihood for Indigenous tourism businesses. All of these aspects remain true today, and they should, because those are really important. That's the difference between the non-Indigenous tourism lens on the industry versus the Indigenous lens. We would argue those are more important things we do. So what were some of the top barriers in 2015 when we released the report? And again, the study that we did then is still true 10 years later. There needs to be organization and coordinated Indigenous tourism approaches. Without a national body like ITAC, or without Indigenous provincial territorial organizations, it's very difficult to manage a national strategy, or it's difficult to help communities understand their most successful pathways to reaching ultimately sustainable, feasible businesses. All of these things are very important on the coordinating side of it. Market readiness still is a challenge for many of the businesses that are being built. We have about 1,900 today, as I've talked about earlier. But many of our businesses indicate to us they want to be export ready. But the truth is, less than, it's about 10% of those businesses in the country are truly export ready. So we've got a lot of development that needs to happen to help them understand the investments they need and the pathway. We continue to be challenged with, qualified workforce and the right kind of Indigenous tourism training programming and coordinating all of these things. Significant infrastructure challenges, just many of our product is rural, remote, north, and that comes with other just access issues. So whether it's transportation access, air access, if you will, or just having the right kind of destination development in the communities. One of the other challenges we've got of many is that a lot of the businesses have been involved as entrepreneurs, and they're simple businesses or they're smaller mom and pop businesses, but there's no real adequate accommodations in the area. The food services is lacking. These are things that continue to have to be addressed. So Indigenous tourism in Canada. So this still remains true today on the historical. We've now come out with this concept of a 2030 pledge. And what we've been trying to do is help Canada realize its role to become really, truly the Indigenous, the world leader or global leader in Indigenous tourism by 2030. And we've done enough research and studying to really identify down to three main metrics. And of course, below that is a lot of things that have to happen. But the three main measurables by 2030, we need 60,000 jobs in Indigenous tourism. We need 2,700 businesses. So we have to build at least another 800 or so. And we've broken it down by every province and territory. And we want to be about $6 billion in total revenues and contributions to Canada's GDP. So that's basically tripling the industry in terms of the economic impacts. So it's no small task, but we know that the demands, the visitor demands domestically and internationally continue to be there, but we have to put in the right kind of programs and incentives to get to that place, or we know it won't grow at the speed we think it should grow to get to that place. So it comes down to all of these things, that these are important visions, but at the end of the day, we have to have tactical plans. And so when it comes back to those barriers of coordination, the question always becomes, well, whose responsibility is it? Is it post-secondary like yourselves? Is it DMO, destination marketing organizations? Is it federal, provincial ministries of tourism, or the departments? Is it the federal government? We would argue it's not, it's the role to support an Indigenous-led strategy. And so we would want people to understand what we firmly see as the strategy. So we've been trying to give industry and partners the tools to understand what we think are the most effective ways to build this industry. It's not that partners can't help, it's how do we collectively work to meeting these potential objectives, right? And to meet the full potential what could happen for Indigenous tourism in this country. So this is an example. We have an action plan this year. It was an ambitious plan at 21.5 million, and people, our partners, we continue to explain to them, we are raising resources from every partnership we can to contribute to this plan, because we know that the tactics in here, in the four main pillars of leadership, partnership, development, and marketing, are what really needs to be done to continue building the industry. So we've got branding programs, we've got specific provincial, territorial, Indigenous tourism investments, we've got labor market investments, we've got all sorts of tactical things around research and other things that really we believe is the most important investments to help reach those goals by 2030. So, we just encourage partners to continue to be aware of that. So just a quick, it's basically broken down into 28 what we call key performance indicators. And I know each of you has departments, or you have programs you're running. I'm assuming we all can appreciate that these are the kind of things that help ensure that we communicate how we met our metrics at the end of how do we define success at the end of the day. So I just want to just stop there for a second and talk about, so what really is driving all of these investments? Why would we want to see these kind of investments? Why would we want to move to that place? Well, I'm going to plan with you a couple things. We do a lot of visitor research with Destination Canada. And so this is an example of some of the research we've done with specific international markets. You can see there's 10 what we'd call core markets that we have been really focusing on with Destination Canada. And these are these specific activities that the visitors are interested when they mention that they want to do Indigenous tourism. And you can see the surveying, it was quite substantial in some of these markets. But for the US, you can see they want to just do any sort of what they perceive as Indigenous people and their culture. They want to visit historic buildings, churches, and food and drinks, like obviously culinary. You go to Mexico, same thing, Indigenous people and their culture. They want cultural activities, right? And that can be done in a variety of ways through tourism businesses. Again, food and drinks, historical buildings, and churches. I won't go through each market, but I'm saying that we continue to try and understand why cultural tourism is so important, because Indigenous people and their culture is always the number one request when the international visitor wants to come to Canada and add that to their itineraries or their trip plans. So that's very important to us. Now, here's the challenge we've got. We continue to have both a domestic and international marketing challenge. It's very true in where you are in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia has some, very strong Indigenous communities, but the awareness of where to find Indigenous tourism is extremely low. And it's not that people aren't motivated. It's not that visitors, largely domestic audience, I might add, in Atlantic Canada. But the fact is, people aren't very clear where to find these destinations or these experiences. So this is only reinforced with the survey work we've done, and this work was completed this last year. So if we look at the U.S., when visitors from the U.S. are looking for Indigenous experiences, they view really within the U.S. as their main market, and Mexico, and then Canada's fifth place. Mexico, there's a lot of visitors that want to have cultural experiences, but as you can see, we're last on the list. Canada, great news is that domestically, which is I think very strong as well for Atlantic Canada with the product and the things that are being developed there, because there's a very large domestic market, is very high. It's at least 37% are very choose Canada as their main Indigenous experience destination. Germany, you can see we're again about fifth place. France, we're very high, and I really believe that's because you've had Quebec Indigenous tourism for just about 30 years in place. They've done tremendous amount of work marketing and sales missions and working with that particular market for 30 years, and I believe that's why Canada's number 2 on that list. The UK, we're fourth place, and then when we get into some of the other sort of Asian Pacific and Australian market, you can see like we're top. I guess we're third in Australia. China, we slipped to fifth. Japan, we're last, and South Korea, we're last. So these are, as we work with Destination Canada and we work with partners, it's important that marketing is very, very important to the planning of how we are going to support these businesses to be stable and feasible. So this is just a snapshot of the other kind of research. We continue to do a tremendous amount of supply side research. We work with our partners at the Conference Board of Canada, and we will be coming out with an updated inventory of our businesses in the fall here of 2024. So I encourage you to watch for that. Now, we've also worked with Conference Board of Canada and their economists to go, okay, so if we were going to build 800 new businesses, what needs to be the strategy? We behind the scenes, we're working through what was the investments required. And it's no small ticket. It's about 2.6 billion is truly required if we want to build 800 new businesses. And within that 800, without getting into too many details, we know that at least 100 of them have to be major destination projects where there are large accommodations, where there's cultural activities and maybe a cultural center there. There have to be a place where people can go and stay and explore, right? And so it can't be just one-off small mom and pop businesses. We need those entrepreneurs, but we do need some major destination projects in the country. So we know that from our perspective, we believe about 30 million needs to be invested in recruitment, training, and retention. 1.6 billion in what we call the infrastructure development that I spoke about. We continue to work with the industry. We know that about 500 million is required for airport indigenization. And I say this with the greatest of respect, but when you go into a place like Halifax, the airport is very modest with any sort of really awareness that you're in an Indigenous destination. And so it's not like when you come where I am in Vancouver and YVR, where you can feel the culture right within the airport, and you never get a second chance to make that first impression on international visitors, domestic people coming into this province. So we want to work with airports throughout the country and introduce program investments so we can actually incentivize them to add more Indigenous content in a real and meaningful way within those airports. There's an envelope we believe is required for business development and promotion, going back to the whole marketing piece I've spoken about. And then finally, about 300 million for Indigenous destination development. Everywhere in Atlantic Canada, you can see there's a number of, primarily of identified First Nation communities. But the truth is, many of the communities are still sort of wrestling with their actual destination planning, right? So they have comprehensive community plans. They identify tourism as a priority, but behind that, there's limited work being done on what is actually what is the destination development plan for those communities, so that the communities support it in a healthy and prosperous way. We know that I know firsthand, Atlantic Canada, there's a lot of good support and social license for Indigenous tourism, but it's not really taken as an opportunity that could see it as seriously as they probably could. And so I think we're trying to attract investments to go provide communities a little bit more resources to make this more of a very specific destination plan for those communities. So, this is just some of the work on the right-hand side of the slide. We've been investing at ITAC with various federal programs and initiatives we've been securing from the government of Canada and other partners. And in between 2020 and 2024, we invested about 24.3 million across Canada, 2.9 million in direct support for the provincial and territorial Indigenous tourism organizations, like Institute is one of the recipients, 21.4 million in direct support for Indigenous tourism businesses in Canada. A lot of that happened during COVID, and we continue to do things like the Tourism Relief Fund. We've done other things like the micro and small business stream support. So these are things we're doing to help businesses continue to become more market and export ready. So we are now also working on tourism revenue generation. ITAC and all of our network, we don't have the luxury of a hotel tax, and I really feel this is a massive issue for us. And the reason why there was 3 prior national bodies is there's no one really owns Indigenous tourism in the country, which is a really big challenge for us. When we go to the government of Canada, sometimes we're with Indigenous Services Canada because they've got a program that they might unlock some resources and applications for. And then the other times we go with Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. And that's the Federal Tourism Minister's department. But no one really owns us. There's no core funding. We're always fighting for every cent, and it's always a debate challenge. So we've been implementing our own voluntary destination marketing fund program. We're trying to get DMOs. We're trying to get all the non-Indigenous industry partners to sign up. And I got to be honest, it's been difficult to help the industry recognize their role towards reconciliation in this country. So these are things that we're not trying to be disrespectful to the industry, but tourism has always held itself out as an industry that wants to help communities, and we see tourism as a force for good change. And I do agree with that in principle, but then I do want to challenge people then to say, well, if you believe that, then what are you doing to specifically support Indigenous tourism then? And what are you doing to support to leave benefits behind? Because those are the things that we find difficult to measure or people are uncomfortable measuring. And so we've created this program in response, and we continue to hope that as this program evolves, we get more major brands on board, we get more hotels, and I'm talking the non-Indigenous side. This is their way to participate. And so we've created this logo, this program, this brand to do that. And I'll just let the video speak for itself. So we've now put that program out there. And of course, this is around us trying to contribute towards getting towards the 2030 targets, right? 800 new businesses, 21,000 new jobs or so, and trying to get to that 6 billion in contributions. So these are important pieces of that. Alongside of that, we've also introduced to the industry a Truth to Action Reconciliation training for the tourism industry program. It's with our partners. It's a First Nation business called Legacy Bows. And so we're doing that for boards and management to give them ways to help them think about how are they going to support reconciliation through the tourism industry. So this is really, we're trying to find ways around this, and we can encourage people to look at the website to understand a bit more about these programs and become involved, right? And these are things that are practical ways we can do this, that you can help. And I'll come back to this at the end of this presentation. I'll show you specifically what our vision is for, of course, in Nova Scotia. Now, the last part of the presentation, as we sort of wind this up, there's a few more things, but I just want to spend a few minutes on the original. When I've talked a lot about marketing, research, some initiatives, but our collective issue right now is that the marketing awareness that I talked about is because there's confusing brands. People don't understand the different dynamics of the Mi'kmaq communities or the Cree communities or the Inuit communities. Most visitors are starting with a very modest, if any, knowledge at all about Indigenous people in Canada, not even understanding that when you say Indigenous, there's First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. Like they think that maybe they think it's just First Nation people. Maybe they think that there's all sorts of cultural things that are not understood. But the originals are in response to how do we have one brand for the country to help people understand it. We just want to motivate people to understand if they get to these businesses with this brand, that it's an authentic Indigenous experience. And that's what our visitor surveying has told us time and time again. People just aren't sure. They want to be respectful, but they want assurances. And there has been challenges from our perspective with non-Indigenous owned product that is not really authentic. So that seems to be disappearing, but what's not is there's still the confusion in the marketplace, whether it's international or domestic, of how do they differentiate? So we continue to build this brand. We have hundreds of businesses in the country now that have received our original accreditation. It's ISO certified now. And so these are the things we're doing. And this video will give you a bit more insight into that. So we, just a context of this, the original, it's been an evolution. We've been developing as a national body. Before we even were incorporated, we were pulling together, if you recall, from the Aboriginal Tourism Marketing Circle. And we've been trying to develop the national standards for market readiness, not from a non-Indigenous perspective, but from an Indigenous, and in a way that is Indigenous led. And so that's the part of the initial impetus of this. And at that time, we had in 2013 had started that journey. By 2018, we had updated the guidelines. ITAC was in place. We were working with a number of provincial, territorial, Indigenous tourism partners, several members, Indigenous-owned operators, doing case studies. So we know how important this is, particularly on the visitor side, as I said earlier. In 2019, 2020, we invested heavily through what we called Project Rise, and it was around developing the standard now. What does it actually take to create an accredited program, right? Of course, we know COVID-19 disrupted some of that work, but we've continued now post-COVID to really work to continue implementing this program. So, it really is a program to help every business, no matter how large or how small, because ultimately we're trying, the more business we get into the originals, the more we can help bring to the marketplace, because that's what's driving the core of our marketing, is looking for the brand, and I'll come to that shortly. So how do we use that mark? Well, I mean, the mark of excellence. You have to be members of the organization. We encourage membership. 51% Indigenous owned, and you have to have a visitor ready or export ready experience. And most of our businesses, it's been our experience so far that very few of them know exactly where they fit on that. And this accredited program now, which there's an extensive application process, helps them identify the challenges or the barriers, if you will, of what needs to be addressed to move them along should they really want to go down that. It gives them a roadmap and a prescriptive plan of what they need to fix or improve. So how are we using the original? And we're every day now, these are things that are out there right now in summertime. We've got buses in different parts of the country. We branded with the original. We will have transit in Halifax, if not already out there right now. We're doing airport activations in several major airports across the country, and you can see some of the creative content here, and you'll see it's all part of the original branding. This is a particular airport activation we did with our partners at Quebec Indigenous Tourism, and you can see it's co-branded here. And then we're doing a series of social media posts or campaign posters, and having a little fun with the culture, but building the brand and the original and the content that really, as Indigenous people, would also find this very appropriate, right? So we've just found a really good balance in that. And so it's in all our campaign advertising this summer, really trying to drive that awareness throughout the country. So, I think I just want to leave you with on this. It's around, the program impacts. We want to build consumer trust and confidence. It continues. We've done focus groups that I didn't get into all the kind of research we've done. US, some domestic focus groups. We've really heard loudly some of the concerns, and so this is again the context of why we've done this work. We want to assure quality and value for consumers. We want to build a world-class destination, as we said, by 2030, and we want to make sure it's branded in a way that we can show how it's become a world-class destination. So, and again, obviously the awareness. So who benefits? Of course, three major beneficiaries, right? Consumers, business operators, and the entire Indigenous tourism sector. Every nation wants their cultural icons. We understand that. I come from a community. Our board all comes from different communities. Our staff, many of them come from communities. Everyone wants their cultural brands, but the problem is, the second we have that, it's difficult to say we represent in a cultural way the country. So we really spent a lot of time building the original concept with obviously the double O, and we feel it's the most neutral way that we can just build that awareness. And then once they get into the product or the destination or the experience, of course, then that's up to the business at that point to really educate people. And I think that's the most effective way for us. And I won't get to much more than that, but obviously visitors are going to be looking for the markets. That's simple. We're pushing it out in every sales channel with all of our trade partners, and we're going to continue to do that. We have had, and I just want to say why, one thing I want to point out why it matters. We have had an award-winning marketing strategy. A couple of years ago, we won an international award for our building the brand and the original campaign. And so we're really proud of that, and it's getting recognition globally now. So these are really important things that, as you think about ways you're working with communities, are they aware of these initiatives? Are they involved? Are they participating? Do they have their businesses participating in these initiatives? Because it benefits them, and we invest and subsidize significant amount of marketing for them using that brand. So, I'm not going to get through the rest of these because in the interest of time, obviously I said about 40 minutes. I'm a little over 40 now. Just want to leave you with some other things we're doing. We are now taking this work to an international place. Some of you may be aware. We've created the Destination Original Indigenous Tourism. So Maori Tourism, the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association, and ITAC officially announced in February. Some of you might have been at our International Indigenous Tourism Conference in Ottawa. We announced the development of this new international organization, and really meant to address global Indigenous tourism marketing and policy development. No one is in that space doing that for us on an international level. And what we're trying to do with ITAC is build our original brand into that global place as well. And so Maori tourism leaders believe that's the right thing to do, and so does IANTA. And so we're really become very strong partners. This is some of the way it's going to content. It'll be created for destination or original Indigenous tourism, travels in our nature. I won't get too much into that, but just watch for this. And the meaning of the logo, the center is Mother Earth. You can see the droplet, life, water, and the radiance, the sun weaving. These are so culturally iconic to many of our Indigenous communities in Canada, but they're also relevant to the American Indigenous communities, and as well as Maori people. I mean, all of us agreed this was the logo that we could all stand with and build as we're building this international organization. So, what I just want to finish with is I put in your calendars now the work you're doing. We have our 12th International Indigenous Tourism Conference coming up in Montreal, February 25th to 27th. Some of you have been to our IITC conferences in the past. This is going to be co-hosted with Quebec Indigenous Tourism, and this is when we announced it in Ottawa in February at our last conference. Probably 11 to 1,200 delegates, and we'll see substantial interest, of course, internationally as well, with international delegates registering. So, put that in your calendar. So, what we do there is we obviously feature some of these initiatives in more detail. We also have one of the things we've been building is in the National Indigenous Tourism Awards, and these are some of the categories. So last year was we had over 110 Indigenous tourism businesses apply in the 9 categories. And so it's really become the iconic event of the year for our industry. And I encourage you to think about attending that. And the last thing I'll just show is we've been building massive new relationships. Many of these brands you'll recognize, very important to how we're doing the work into the future. So I just really feel that we're trying to, bring together a national strategy, and we're getting there. I would say that we have a long ways to go still, but at least we're moving forward, and we got lots of brands. After doing this conference, and I've been here from the first conference, the brands that were there were 0. And so to see where we are today, we've come a long ways, and I just believe we'll get to our goals in the long run. If you want to stay connected, you can obviously follow all of us on whether it's Facebook, Instagram, of course, X, not Twitter anymore, and of course YouTube, Destination Indigenous. If you want to see some of the other videos and the content we've got, and so you can follow us on all of those particular items. Igo igande ha igo guandu dana hey hey igo igande